The walls are closing in on him. I've predicted that for quite some time.
Democrats are savoring a week of misfortune for Donald Trump. 4 more of the president's confidants are now poised to be used against him in Robert Mueller's special investigation. Most recent, Alan Weisselberg, chief financial officer of the Trump Organization, was granted immunity. That could mean big trouble for Trump.
Because Mr. Weisselberg knows where all the money's come from, where it's gone, and for what purpose.
Trump also lost the loyalty of media baron and National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, a longtime ally and protector. Former Trump lawyer, as you know, Michael Cohen, pleaded guilty to 8 financial crimes, and his lawyer says he's ready to talk. And Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chair, was convicted on 8 charges of his own. All of this has striking parallels with the previous White House under siege. Richard Nixon's fate was sealed when his friends and then his party finally turned against him. The CBC's Terrence McKenna talked to key Watergate players and scholars to see what history teaches us now. Here's another look at what he found.
It's a very dishonest media, those people right up there with all the cameras.
How does Donald Trump follow the Nixon playbook? Consider this press conference from October 1973 in the East Room of the White House.
I have never heard or seen such outrageous, vicious, distorted reporting in 27 years of public life.
What is it about the television coverage of you in these past weeks and months that has so aroused your anger?
Don't get the impression that you arouse my anger. One can only be angry with those he respects.
And here is Donald Trump last January in the very same room.
Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people. But, I'm not ranting and raving.
Here is President Nixon speaking to Secretary of State Henry Kissinger in 1972. Echoed by Donald Trump's infamous tweet, "The fake news media is not my enemy, it is the enemy of the American people."
There is the president.
Nixon resigned from the presidency in the face of obstruction of justice charges. And now Trump is being investigated on the same alleged crime. The Watergate scandal that brought Nixon down began with a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in 1972. The burglars were caught and tied to the Nixon campaign. The key question came at Senate hearings from Republican Howard Baker.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
Then came the news that Nixon had secretly taped all the White House sessions in which he methodically planned a cover-up with his close advisors, including paying off the burglars to buy their silence.
Yes, I appreciate that.
In the Oscar-winning movie All the President's Men, Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman play Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who won the Pulitzer Prize for their Watergate coverage. Today, Woodward is writing a book about Donald Trump. Nixon famously said on those tapes, "It's not the crime that gets you, it's the cover-up." Was he right?
Nixon was wrong. It was the crime of Watergate. It was the war against the system of justice in the United States. This was the clear obstruction of justice, and we have those thousands of hours of tapes which really define Watergate and Nixon and the extent of the crimes.
God damn it, I'm never going to discuss this son of a bitching Watergate thing again. Never.
The Nixon presidency had at its center an unstable man.
Historian Tim Naftali was the first independent custodian of the tapes as director of the Nixon Presidential Library.
In terms of temperament, there is a volcanic center to both men. The ranting, the anger, the paranoid concerns, the hatred. Donald Trump, we have the tweets. We have the tweets that are often just rants. This similarity leads to the next big question, I think, which is, will Donald Trump engage in Nixonian activities?
In private, Nixon wanted Teamsters to go out and physically attack protesters, whereas Trump expressed the same attitude in public.
If you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously.
An attempt is being made.
Connecticut Senator Lowell Weicker became famous as a moderate Republican on the Watergate Committee who eventually turned against Richard Nixon.
But the scope of the committee's mandate goes far beyond Watergate.
Today, he is waiting to see evidence before coming to any judgment about Donald Trump.
I started out as a Richard Nixon lover, and it was only after I had facts in hand that I turned the other way. So I'm not willing to go ahead and impose a different set of standards on Donald Trump, and I just don't have those facts.
But Weicker is ready to judge arguments that have been put forward by Mr. Trump's lawyers in the Russia collusion investigation, such as the notion that the president could not commit obstruction of justice by exercising powers granted to him under the U.S. Constitution. That echoes an old Nixon argument.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Nonsense. It's nonsense. I thought it was nonsense then, nonsense now. The lawyers don't speak for the Constitution of the United States or the people of this country. No man in this nation is above the law.
When you look at what's gone on with the FBI and with the Justice Department, people are very, very angry.
Donald Trump regularly attacks the FBI and the special counsel investigation. Trump said to the New York Times that former FBI Director Robert Mueller would be acting improperly if he starts looking into the finances of the Trump Organization. Now, of course, Trump is suggesting that Mueller would cross a red line if he starts looking at the finances and his tax returns.
Well, it's too bad for him. I think Mueller has every right to do that.
I think Mueller has to go there, and it would not be like him or like federal prosecutors to kind of say, oh, we're not going to look in that corner. They look in every corner.
That the work will continue.
Of course, there is widespread speculation that Trump will just fire Robert Mueller,
6 FBI agents present.
echoing the famous Saturday Night Massacre when Nixon fired Watergate Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox, along with the Attorney General and his deputy.
The country tonight is in the midst of what may be the most serious constitutional crisis in its history.
The political impact of the Saturday Night Massacre was giant because there was a sense of, hey, Nixon's firing the person who's investigating him. That led to the impeachment inquiry.
Oh, I think if Trump fired Bob Mueller, he'd be in the deep you-know-what.
Is that what happened with Nixon?
Yeah. By the time the House of Representatives met to discuss the matter of impeachment, his goose was already cooked.
All those in favor, please signify.
By all accounts, there was much more bipartisanship in the Nixon era. In the end, the evidence against the president caused many congressmen in his own party to vote for his impeachment.
Mr. Cohen.
Could that happen today?
The Republicans run the House, the Senate, and the White House. The best thing that we could have happen is in 2018 to have the Democrats take control of one House. It doesn't have to be 2. 1's fine.
Oh, my goodness. If the Democrats take one of the houses of Congress, let alone both of them, one can anticipate public hearings. I'm not saying that you can anticipate impeachment. It's a tough political process that will require a lot of Republican support for it to happen. But you'll have public hearings. It's going to be on television and on the web all the time. And that would have an eroding effect on President Trump's support and his legitimacy, just as it did for Richard Nixon.
What, in your view, finally kind of turned Nixon's allies against him?
Great question. Nixon, from the Watergate burglary to the resignation was 2 years, 2 months, and it was continual drip, drip, drip of tapes, evidence, testimony, memoirs, people doing television interviews. It was it was a giant barrage of evidence.
If Nixon had burned those White House tapes, do you think he would have survived?
He definitely would have survived. You need, in an investigation like this, a path to proof. Those tapes were proof. If you don't have that path, it's hard.
Even if the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives in the midterm elections this year, and if the House then votes for impeachment, it would still take a 2/3 vote in the Senate to actually remove Trump from office. With today's Republican Party, that possibility seems quite remote.
There's the president waving goodbye.
But considering how fast Nixon's support from his own party melted, it's not impossible. For The National, I'm Terrence McKenna in Washington.